Welcome. Be sure to like and subscribe for more scary stories, or I will come for you. If anyone would like early access to my latest stories and an ad-free listening experience, consider becoming one of the Curator's disciples. The link is in the description below. Story number 1. La Niebla Rosa by the Curator. Hey, everyone. I'm Alex Ramirez, and I want to share a story that changed my life forever. This is not something I ever thought I'd experience, let alone survive to tell the tale. It all started when I was just an ordinary 24-year-old cybersecurity student living in North Carolina. My life was pretty normal, balancing school, part-time jobs, and hanging out with friends. But everything took a dark turn one night when I stumbled upon something I was never supposed to see. To give you a bit of background, I grew up in a small town in Texas. My parents were hard-working immigrants from Mexico, and they instilled in me the values of perseverance and integrity. My dad worked as a mechanic, while my mom took on multiple jobs to make ends meet. They sacrificed a lot to provide for me and my younger sister. Growing up, I was always fascinated by computers and technology. While other kids were playing outside, I was usually indoors, tinkering with old computers and teaching myself how to code. High school was a tough time for me. I was bullied for being a nerd and for my family's modest means. But I found solace in my passion for cybersecurity. I joined the computer club and spent countless hours learning everything I could about hacking and digital forensics. I wanted to use my skills to make a difference, to fight against the bad guys who exploited others through the dark web. After graduating, I managed to get into a decent university on a scholarship. It wasn't easy juggling classes, part-time jobs, and maintaining a social life, but I was determined to succeed. I made a few close friends, including Maria, who shared my passion for cybersecurity. She was always up for a challenge and had a knack for finding underground networks. Little did I know, this friendship would become a lifeline in the most terrifying experience of my life. It was a late night, and I was working on a school project about digital forensics. I had been researching various dark web marketplaces and forums, trying to find examples of how cyber criminals operated. The dark web can be a goldmine for such information, but it's also a place where you have to tread carefully. One wrong click, and you could find yourself in a world of trouble. I was using Tor, a browser that allows anonymous browsing on the dark web. My goal was to find real-world examples of digital forensics cases to include in my project. I navigated through various hidden services, from shady marketplaces to obscure forums. It was while browsing one of these forums that I stumbled upon a post that caught my eye. The post was from an anonymous user who claimed to have access to a goldmine of information about a powerful organization. They mentioned having documents and videos that could expose massive corruption and criminal activities. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to follow the link provided in the post. The link led me to a hidden service that required a special invite code to access. Luckily, the forum post included the code. I entered it, and after a few moments, I was granted access to a secure, encrypted archive. The archive's interface was basic, just a directory of folders and files, but it was what those files contained that made my blood run cold. I started by opening a folder labeled Financial Records. Inside, I found hundreds of invoices and transaction records. As I skimmed through them, I noticed that these weren't just ordinary transactions. They were payments amounting to millions of dollars, funneled to various political figures and influential individuals across North America, Europe, and Asia. It was clear that these documents were evidence of widespread corruption and money laundering. My heart pounded as I continued to explore the archive. Each folder I opened revealed more damning evidence. There were emails, bank statements, and detailed ledgers that painted a picture of a vast criminal enterprise. It felt like I was peeling back layers of a massive conspiracy. Then, I found a folder labeled Niebla Rosa. The name intrigued me, and without fully understanding what I was about to see, I clicked on it. Inside, I found several video files. The names of the files were dates, suggesting they documented specific events. With a deep breath, I clicked on the first video. I remember the exact moment I clicked on the first video titled La Niebla Rosa. My hands were shaking, my stomach in knots. As the video loaded, I was greeted with the grainy footage of a dimly lit room. The camera panned to a terrified man, bound to a chair, his eyes wide with fear. He was gagged, and his muffled cries echoed in the small space. Two cartel members entered the frame, their faces obscured by masks. They moved with a chilling calmness, as if this was just another day at work for them. One of them carried a metal tray with surgical tools, while the other held a small device that looked like a detonator. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched them approach the bound man. The masked men began their gruesome work, cutting open the man's abdomen with precision. Blood spilled onto the floor as they worked methodically, their expressions hidden but their actions speaking volumes. I felt nauseous, my mind struggling to process the horror unfolding before me. They inserted a small C4 explosive into the man's body cavity, stitching him back up with a sickening efficiency. The man was still conscious, his eyes darting around in sheer terror. He knew what was coming, and so did I. The camera zoomed in on his face, capturing every tear, every sob, every plea for mercy. Then, the masked man with the detonator stepped back, holding the device up for the camera to see. He pressed the button, and the screen erupted in a blinding flash of light and a deafening explosion. The man's body was torn apart in an instant, a gruesome mist of blood and gore painting the walls. I sat there, paralyzed, my mind racing. This was real. This was happening, and I had just witnessed it. The video ended abruptly, leaving me in a stunned silence. I couldn't move, couldn't think. The sheer brutality of it all left me shaken to my core. I was faced with a moral dilemma. I knew I had to report this to the authorities, but I also knew that doing so would put me and my family in grave danger. The cartel didn't mess around. If they found out I had their information, they would come after me. But I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. I had to do something. I decided to gather as much evidence as possible. I spent days downloading invoices, video clips, and other incriminating documents. My computer was filled with this stuff, and I was constantly looking over my shoulder, paranoid that someone was watching me. I couldn't do this alone. I confided in my close friend Maria, another cybersecurity enthusiast. Maria was always up for a challenge, and she had connections to an underground network of hacktivists. If anyone could help, it was them. Maria was shocked when I showed her the evidence. She immediately agreed to help and put me in touch with the hacktivist group. They were all in, ready to take down the cartel. But it wasn't long before the cartel found out about the breach. They sent me a message, a clear warning to stay silent or face the consequences. My blood ran cold when I saw it. They knew who I was. The hacktivists and I worked tirelessly to compile and disseminate the evidence while staying one step ahead of the cartel. It was a race against time, and every moment was filled with tension. We knew the cartel was getting closer. One night, we were forced into hiding. Maria and I moved from place to place, never staying anywhere too long. We were constantly on the move, trying to avoid detection. The stress was overwhelming, but we couldn't give up. We had to see this through. The cartel intensified their efforts to find us. It felt like they were always one step behind. Then, the worst happened. One of the hacktivists betrayed us, selling us out to the cartel for a hefty reward. I was captured and brought to a secluded location. My heart pounded in my chest as I was tied up and thrown into a dark room. The cartel planned to make me the next victim of La Niebla Rosa. They recorded a video, showing me bound and terrified. I knew it was a warning to others who might dare to expose them. I was sure my life was about to end in the most horrific way imaginable. The room was dimly lit, and the walls were lined with plastic sheets to contain the blood. The air was thick with the stench of fear and anticipation. My heart pounded in my chest as the cartel members surrounded me, their faces obscured by masks. One of them, a man with cold, calculating eyes, approached me holding a pair of bolt cutters. My mind raced, trying to find a way out, but there was none. They had me completely at their mercy. He grabbed my hand, wrenching it forward, and positioned the bolt cutters around my index finger. I screamed, a raw, primal sound that echoed in the small room. The pain was instantaneous and excruciating as the bolt cutters snapped shut, severing my finger in a single, brutal motion. Blood spurted from the wound, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The cartel members laughed, their eyes gleaming with sadistic pleasure. "Let's see if you're still brave enough to expose us," the man sneered, moving to my next finger. He took his time, savoring every moment of my agony. The bolt cutters bit into my flesh again, and I screamed until my throat was raw. The pain was unimaginable, a white-hot explosion that consumed my entire being. The severed arteries in my fingers sprayed blood everywhere, the crimson liquid painting the floor and splattering all over my clothes. I watched in horror as the blood formed pools around me, the metallic scent mixing with the stench of fear. Each time the bolt cutters snapped shut, another fountain of blood erupted, the warm liquid soaking through my clothes and dripping down my arms. They didn't stop there. Each finger was taken with a deliberate, methodical cruelty. By the time they reached my last finger, I was barely conscious, my vision swimming with dark spots. The room was filled with the metallic scent of blood, and my hands were a mangled mess of flesh and bone. I don't know how long I was there, suspended in that nightmarish limbo between consciousness and oblivion. Time lost all meaning as I endured wave after wave of unimaginable pain. The cartel members continued their grisly work, their laughter a haunting soundtrack to my suffering. Then, in the midst of my torment, I heard a commotion outside the room. The door burst open and gunfire erupted. The sound was deafening, a chaotic symphony of violence and destruction. I felt a surge of hope, but it was quickly dashed by the overwhelming fear that this might be the end. Maria and the remaining loyal hacktivists had tracked down the location where I was being held. They stormed the hideout with a fierce determination, engaging in a brutal battle with the cartel members. The room was a blur of movement and noise as they fought their way to me. She looked like an avenging angel, her face set in a mask of grim determination. She fought her way to my side, her eyes widening in horror as she took in my mutilated hands. "Alex, we're getting you out of here," she shouted over the din of gunfire. With swift, practiced movements, she cut through the ropes that bound me. I could barely stand, my legs buckling under the weight of my injuries. But Maria supported me, half carrying me out of that hellish room. As we stumbled out into the hallway, the battle raged around us. The cartel members were relentless, fighting back with everything they had. Maria and the hacktivists were equally determined, their resolve unshakable. It felt like we were in a war zone, the air thick with smoke and the acrid smell of gunpowder. Suddenly, the sound of gunfire intensified, and I saw flashes of movement at the far end of the hallway. The SWAT team had arrived, their presence a beacon of hope in the midst of the chaos. They moved with precision and efficiency, their training evident in every calculated step. The cartel members, realizing they were outmatched, fought back with a desperate fury. The SWAT team methodically advanced, their weapons trained on the cartel members. The air was filled with the sharp cracks of gunfire and the dull thuds of bodies hitting the ground. The cartel members fell one by one, their blood staining the floor. Maria and the hacktivists took advantage of the SWAT team's arrival, using the chaos to their advantage. They fought their way to the exit, dragging me along with them. The pain in my hands was excruciating, but the adrenaline coursing through my veins kept me moving. We burst out into the night, the cool air a stark contrast to the suffocating heat of the hideout. The SWAT team continued their advance, systematically clearing the hideout room by room. Cartel members were no match for their training and firepower. The sound of gunfire gradually died down, replaced by the heavy silence of the aftermath. The SWAT team had done their job, killing every last one of the cartel members and securing the hideout. Maria and the hacktivists helped me into a waiting ambulance. The paramedics worked quickly, tending to my injuries. I could barely stay conscious, my vision swimming with dark spots, but I felt a sense of relief. We had survived. Back at a safe house, Maria and the hacktivists began the painstaking process of compiling all the evidence we had gathered. The documents, videos, and other incriminating materials were carefully organized and encrypted before being released to international media outlets. The response was immediate and overwhelming. News of the cartel's activities spread like wildfire, sparking outrage and calls for justice across the globe. Governments and law enforcement agencies were forced to take action. High-profile individuals implicated in the cartel's operations were arrested, their careers and reputations shattered. The cartel's influence began to crumble under the weight of the exposure, their operations dismantled piece by piece. Maria and I were placed in a witness protection program. Our lives had been irrevocably changed by the events we had experienced, but there was also a sense of accomplishment. We had done something that mattered, something that made a difference. Despite the constant threat looming over us, we found solace in knowing that our actions had brought about significant change. Sitting in a small, anonymous apartment, I watched a news report on the dismantling of the cartel's operations and the arrest of several high-profile individuals. The footage showed police raids, arrests, and the somber faces of those who had been complicit in the cartel's activities. It was a bittersweet moment, a reminder of the horrors we had faced and the lives that had been lost. Despite the fear that still lingered, I felt a sense of pride. Our actions had exposed a massive network of corruption and violence. We had faced unimaginable danger and emerged victorious. It was a victory tinged with sadness, but a victory nonetheless. Story number 2, The Torture Chamber, by the Curator. I can't believe I'm actually writing this down. I guess it all started when I stumbled upon this dark web forum. I was just a regular guy, browsing the internet late at night, looking for something interesting. I had heard about the dark web before, but I never really took it seriously. One night, though, curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to dive in. I found a forum called the Torture Chamber. The name itself was disturbing, but I was intrigued. It was a community of people who shared and live-streamed their torturing techniques on kidnapped victims. At first, I thought it was some sick joke or a bunch of edgy kids trying to be cool. But as I read through the threads and watched some of the videos, I realized it was real. Horribly real. The forum was full of users showcasing their strange and unusual techniques to make people suffer. They were always trying to outdo each other, motivated by uncovering new methods of torture. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, but I couldn't look away either. To understand how I got here, you have to understand where I came from. My name is Toby, and I grew up in a small town in the South. My childhood was pretty normal, at least on the surface. My parents were strict but loving, and I did well in school. I had friends, played sports, and did all the things kids do, but there was always something different about me, something dark that I couldn't quite put my finger on. I remember the first time I hurt someone. I was 10 years old, and a neighborhood kid, Tommy, had been bullying me for weeks. One day, I snapped. I waited for him after school, hiding behind a tree with a rock in my hand. When he walked by, I jumped out and hit him in the head with the rock. He fell to the ground, bleeding and crying. I stood there, frozen, staring at the blood on the rock and the fear in his eyes. It was the first time I felt that rush, that sense of power. I knew it was wrong, but it felt so good. After that, I started looking for other ways to hurt people. I kept it small at first, hurting animals or picking fights with other kids. I learned how to hide my tracks, to make sure no one suspected me. I became good at it, and as I got older, the urge only grew stronger. In high school, I discovered the internet. It was like a whole new world had opened up to me. I found forums and chat rooms where people talked about their dark fantasies, where I could share my own thoughts without fear of judgment. I started spending more and more time online, diving deeper into the darkest corners of the web. I moved away for college, but I didn't fit in. I couldn't relate to the other students, their petty problems and mundane lives. I dropped out after a year and moved to the city, looking for something more. I found work in a warehouse, a dead-end job that paid the bills but left me feeling empty. My only solace was the internet, where I could be myself, where I could explore the darkness that had always been a part of me. One night, while browsing the dark web, I stumbled upon the torture chamber. It was like I had found my true home. The forum was full of people like me. People who understood the thrill of causing pain, the rush of power it gave. I spent hours reading through the posts, watching the videos, fascinated by the creativity and brutality of the users. The first video that really got to me was from a user named Painmaster. He had a young woman tied to a chair in a dark basement. The room was dimly lit, and you could barely make out her face, but you could see the fear in her eyes. Painmaster started by talking to the camera, explaining his technique. He was going to use a combination of psychological and physical torture to break her spirit. He began by playing a recording of her family's voices, telling her they had abandoned her. The woman broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Her tears glistened in the faint light, and her sobs echoed off the concrete walls. Then, he took out a set of needles and started inserting them under her fingernails, one by one. The needles were long and thin, glinting ominously as he held them up to the camera for everyone to see. Her screams were deafening, her body convulsing with each new needle. Painmaster just smiled, his eyes glinting with a sick pleasure as he narrated every step for the viewers. The needles went deeper and deeper, blood pooling under her nails, her fingers twitching uncontrollably. I felt sick to my stomach, but I couldn't stop watching. The second video was from a user named Dr. Torment. He had a man strapped to a metal table, completely naked. The room looked like a makeshift laboratory, with various tools and chemicals scattered around. The man was gagged, his eyes wide with terror as he struggled against the restraints. Dr. Torment explained that he was going to experiment with a new chemical he had developed, designed to cause excruciating pain without causing permanent damage. He injected the man with the chemical, and within seconds, the man started convulsing violently. His veins bulged, his skin turning a sickly shade of green as the chemical spread through his body. His screams, muffled by the gag, were desperate and haunting. Dr. Torment watched with a twisted fascination, taking notes on a clipboard. The man's muscles spasmed uncontrollably. His eyes rolled back into his head, tears streaming down his face. He begged for mercy through the gag, but there was none to be found. The viewers in the chat were giving real-time feedback and suggestions, urging Dr. Torment to push the experiment further. It was like watching a live horror show. The third video was from a user called The Artist. He was different from the others. He saw torture as an art form and took pride in his work. His victim was a young boy, no older than 16, tied to a wooden chair. The boy's eyes were red and swollen from crying, his wrists and ankles raw from the tight ropes binding him. The artist had a collection of scalpels and knives laid out neatly on a table, each one meticulously cleaned and sharpened. He explained to the camera that he was going to create a masterpiece by carving intricate patterns into the boy's skin. He started with shallow cuts, tracing delicate lines along the boy's arms and legs. The blood welled up in thin red lines, streaming down the boy's limbs and pooling on the floor. The boy's screams filled the room, his body shaking with pain, but the artist remained calm and focused, like a painter lost in his work. He moved with precision and care, creating beautiful but horrifying designs on the boy's skin. The deeper he cut, the more intricate the patterns became. The boy's skin was a canvas, and the artist was determined to make it a masterpiece of pain. The viewers watched in awe and admiration, their comments praising the artist's skill and creativity. As I watched these videos, something inside me began to change. At first, I was horrified and disgusted, unable to fathom the depths of human cruelty. But then, I started to feel something else, a morbid curiosity that gnawed at my conscience. Each night, I found myself returning to the forum, the allure of the forbidden growing stronger. I wanted to know more, see more, understand more. The transformation was gradual. I started by reading every post, absorbing the detailed descriptions of torture methods and the psychological manipulation techniques. I watched every video, no matter how grotesque. The scenes of agony and suffering, which had once repulsed me, began to fascinate me. I became obsessed with the precision, the methodical approach, and the sheer creativity displayed by the tormentors. I started interacting with the other users, cautiously at first. My questions were clinical, focused on techniques and tools. What kind of ropes do you use to minimize the chance of escape? How do you ensure the victim stays conscious during prolonged sessions? My contributions were met with encouragement and advice, and soon I was a respected member of the community. They welcomed me into their twisted fold, and I felt a sense of belonging I had never experienced before. The forum became my life. I spent hours studying the posts, analyzing the videos, and taking meticulous notes. I began to fantasize about conducting my own sessions. The thought excited me in ways I couldn't explain, filling a void I hadn't realized existed. I knew it was wrong. Every moral fiber in my being screamed against it, but the urge was too powerful to resist. I wanted to know what it felt like to hold that kind of power over someone, to make them suffer, to see the fear in their eyes and hear their desperate pleas for mercy. I started to prepare. I researched the best methods for kidnapping and restraining a victim without attracting attention. I purchased tools and equipment, justifying each item as if it were for a legitimate purpose. I practiced knots and restraints, honing my skills with a precision that would make any scoutmaster proud. Each step brought me closer to my goal, each purchase and practice session feeding my dark desire. The planning phase was the most exhilarating part. I knew I had to be meticulous, leaving nothing to chance. My chosen target was a young girl who lived alone in a quiet neighborhood. She was perfect, isolated, predictable, and unlikely to be missed for hours. I watched her for weeks, learning her routines, noting her habits. She left for work at the same time every morning, returned home at the same time every evening, and rarely interacted with her neighbors. She was a creature of habit, and that made her vulnerable. I spent countless nights outside her house, concealed in the shadows, watching her through the windows. I could see her moving about her home, oblivious to the danger lurking outside. I noted the layout of her house, the position of the doors and windows, the time she went to bed and woke up. I knew when she was most vulnerable, when I could strike without being seen or heard. I rehearsed the kidnapping in my mind over and over. I visualized every step, every action, every possible complication. I would wait until she was asleep, then quietly enter through the back door. I had already disabled her alarm system and ensured that the door could be opened with minimal noise. I would use chloroform to subdue her, ensuring she remained unconscious while I restrained her. I had purchased high-quality restraints, designed to hold even the strongest struggles. I prepared a room in my basement, soundproofed and equipped with everything I would need. I installed hooks and pulleys for suspending the victim, a sturdy chair with straps for secure binding, and a table filled with tools, knives, needles, clamps, and other instruments of pain. Each item was carefully selected and meticulously maintained. I wanted everything to be perfect to ensure the maximum amount of suffering. The anticipation was almost unbearable. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my hands trembling with excitement. I was ready. Tonight was the night. As I stand here, watching her through the window, I can't help but feel a sense of excitement and satisfaction. The glow from her television flickers across her face, highlighting her delicate features. She's completely unaware of the predator lurking outside, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This is what I've been working towards, what I've been dreaming of. I take a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill my lungs. My heart races with anticipation, my mind alive with possibilities. This is my moment, the culmination of months of preparation and planning. I'm ready to take the next step, to become one of the masters of the Forum. I know what I'm doing is wrong, that it's a violation of every moral and ethical code, but I can't stop myself. The urge is too strong, the need too great. I want to make her suffer, to see the fear in her eyes, to hear her screams. I want to show the world what I'm capable of, to prove that I'm worthy of being a part of this community. As I wait for the right moment to strike, I can feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The thrill of the hunt, the anticipation of the kill, it's intoxicating. This is it. This is my moment. I reach into my bag and pull out the chloroform and a cloth. I've practiced this countless times, but the reality of it is making my hands shake with excitement. I take a deep breath and steady myself. I can't afford any mistakes. I approach the window, moving silently. My heart is pounding in my chest, my mind racing with thoughts of what's to come. I can see her clearly now, just a few feet away, oblivious to the danger. I press the cloth to her mouth and nose, holding it firmly in place. She struggles, her eyes wide with terror, but she quickly succumbs to the chloroform. Her body goes limp, and I catch her before she can fall. I carry her to the basement, moving quickly but carefully. The room is prepared, everything is ready. I strap her to the chair, making sure the restraints are secure. I step back and admire my work, a sense of pride swelling in my chest. This is it. This is my masterpiece. As I stand here, watching her unconscious form, I can't help but feel a sense of anticipation and satisfaction. This is what I've been waiting for, what I've been working towards. I'm ready to begin. I take a deep breath and step towards her, my heart pounding with excitement. The night is still young, and I have all the time in the world. This is my moment, and I'm going to make it unforgettable. I'm more motivated than ever to try something new, to push the boundaries even further. I smile as I pick up my first tool, ready to create my masterpiece of pain and suffering. Smile, sweetheart. The night is young. We are just getting started. This is the Curator. I hope you've enjoyed today's scary stories. Until next time.